Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, right, to your afternoon session, or if you're on the West Coast, to your morning session. I'm so excited to have y'all. We've got an awesome speaker. We've got an awesome hour planned for you. It's going to be fantastic. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Ark Telos Saint Amor. It's a long name, so most folks call me Tay, but hey, it's all affirming. My mandatory pronouns are they, them, there, and I'm the executive director of Youth Move National. But more importantly, for today, for right now, I'm your moderator for today's session. So before we get started, let's do some housekeeping items. If you've been on the summit all week, you're probably used to these, but that's okay. We're going to do it anyways. So the first thing I want to talk about is just to remind folks, please, safe, brave, accountable space today, right? That's really what we're trying to go for with this virtual conference. So please slow down, prime with intention, lead with good intention and kindness, and just really think about how we can create a safe, brave, and accountable space for everybody today. If you need a reminder of that statement, if you go to your upper left-hand corner and go to reception, one of the giant blue circles is this statement. So just want to give a friendly reminder of that. Secondly, I want to kind of walk you through a little bit of the toolbar, because before we even get started, there's a pretty cool poll going on right now. So it's important to kind of direct your attention there. So on the vertical left-hand side of your screen, you should see four little boxes. If you don't, you might need to X out of a window, but that'll be the first one. The second one is your chat box. We'll be using the chat box today. I'll be monitoring it. The third one is our Q&A box. That is super important. That's where we need all of your questions to go. If you raise your hand, I'm not going to be able to call on you. If you put a question in the chat, I'm just going to ask you to put it into the Q&A box. So please, the chat is great for dialogue, but the Q&A box is really where we need your questions. There will be a portion at the end for that. One below that is the participant list. You can see all the awesome folks that are in here right now. And then maybe most importantly, the one below that, we've got some three vertical lines, is a poll. Now I'm going to show it up on the stage. Oh, that's so fancy. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this poll is active. If you go to that poll section, please fill this out. This will be super helpful information for our presenter today. So yes, this is active. Go there. Let us know what your experience level is. It'll be great. Okay, last but not least, y'all, we're here for you, right? We want you to have fun. We want this to be knowledgeable. We want this to be good, but not at your own expense. So please make sure you self-care, you decompress, you take breaks, drink water, do your bio breaks, step away if you need to. That's okay. We really want to meet you where you're at. If you need the wellness room, you should find it in that same upper left-hand corner where you'd see that reception. If you go there, a staff member will assist you, right? So we got that wellness room available to you. Okay, I am done talking. I have done 3 minutes on this, and let's get started because this is going to be great. So I want to introduce using a multi-tiered system of supports to model and support sexual and gender minority youth in schools. Favorite topic of mine. So I'd like to welcome Ricky on stage. Ricky, the stage is yours.
I'll try that again. Hello. Okay, so I am going to ask first if everyone can go ahead and take that poll real quick. It will help guide the discussion today. I appreciate you doing that. And I'm going to go ahead and load my presentation. And we'll just get right down to it because we have a lot of information to cover. And especially for a subject that I am so passionate about, for one, there's just never enough time. So, all right, here we go. So the title of the presentation is Making Room for Inclusion using an MTSS model to build supports for sexual and gender minority youth in schools. And I'll explain a little bit more about that terminology here in a minute. And we'll just start off with this quote by Harvey Milk saying, all young people, regardless of sexual orientation or identity, right, deserve a safe and supportive environment in which to achieve their full potential. And I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on the learning outcomes for this session, just because there is so much that we can cover. So first of all, just help participants understand the unique challenges facing sexual and gender minority youth in schools specifically. And then I'm also going to present some recommendations for interventions, future research, that type of thing. And feel free at any point. I did see the comment about the external resources, and I guess I should say, it's probably user error. I'm having a little bit of difficulty with that right now, so I will upload the presentation to the resources tab, but that has not been done yet. All right. Okay, so I think it's really important in the context of these discussions just to start with a little bit of a positionality statement. It also will serve as kind of an introduction to me. So my pronouns are she, her, or they, them. And just putting it up front, I am a queer, non-traditional PhD student with a neurodivergence-related disability. And I'm very, very passionate about promoting a systems approach to ensure that our schools and education systems are providing equitable opportunities for all minoritized populations, but specifically the population is my area of focus is LGBTQ youth. Down in the second, let's see, about halfway through the education thing there, it just says, I'm currently a PhD candidate in the special education program at the University of Oregon. And my areas of focus include suicide prevention, especially in sexual and gender minority populations, intersectionality of disability and SGM identities, and then identification of risk and resiliency factors to inform interventions and attempt to just overall strengthen the voice and improve the experience for minoritized populations. So that is where I am coming from. I also have to add a disclaimer that I am unapologetically passionate about this, about this topic and similar topics. And so some of that is going to come through. There's not any way for me to filter that. And I don't think I would want to if I could. And so just know that I am starting this presentation under the assumption that everyone in the session believes that sexual and gender minority youth are valued, that their voices matter, that they're an essential part of our community, and that they deserve the same treatment as other school populations. And so if we're not on the same page as far as that's concerned, this might be not the right session for you, because I will not do any kind of moral or ethical debating or try to convince you that these youth are worth our time and effort. So hopefully that's okay. I am also going to start with, actually, can you close the poll so I can see the results for that? Okay, there we go. Okay, this is where I don't know. That's okay. I'm gonna hide that. So it looks like we have probably Um, most people, 60%-ish, have some exposure to the topic, and then another 33% who say they're fairly knowledgeable about the topic. So I am going to probably cover some of these initial slides very quickly. There are some people who have no experience with the topic, so I want to make sure the information is there for them. Some of the slides are pretty kind of word heavy. I will not be reading everything off of the slides, but I do think it's important that you have them there. So if you want to, cut this up or pull from it, you're more than welcome to do that. I encourage it. So, all right, here we go. This is just some helpful terminology when we are referring to people within this population. You've probably seen a lot of them. There's some debate about, hey, letter salad, what does it mean? What does it not mean? And just depending on generational experiences, right? The word queer may or may not be triggering or feel acceptable to you. You don't have to use it, but please know that it is an acceptable terminology, and many of us in the queer community are really working to kind of take that word back and say, hey, we're not ashamed of that. We don't see it as a put down. It's yes, loud and proud, I guess. But for most inclusive, the most inclusive academic term that I prefer to use, and some of my colleagues who are also working in this area, is sexual and gender minority. So just SGM. And we feel like this is a really encompassing term, and it's also not exclusionary in the same way that some of the others can be, if you miss a letter or something like that. So hopefully that's helpful for you. You can refer to it just as a little check. So there's a whole rainbow of different kinds of identities that people can have, and they are basically, right, sexual orientation deals with who someone's attracted to, and gender identity deals with the personal sense of one's own gender. And so that's just kind of to situate us there. Yeah, so big takeaway and reminders, right? So this is not a homogenous group that we are dealing with. Identity is personal. It is the individual's decision, and they alone get to choose how they identify. And so it's completely independent of their looks, assumptions, physical characteristics, how they dress, that sort of thing. And so another thing that's really important with this subject matter is just that they choose what to tell and who to tell. And no one is obligated to explain themselves to anyone else, right? And then they also are not obligated, like you are not entitled to any of that information. So it's not that you can never ask questions, right? But we need to be mindful about our relationship with the kiddos and the individuals. And it's always a good idea to you can just ask, seek permission, say, hey, I have a couple questions for you about your your sexual or gender identity. Is it okay if I ask those, of you? Do you feel like answering those right now? Anyway, that's respectful. So just remember that we are not entitled to those details, and they really shouldn't matter anyway. All right. So why is this subject important? And I special education, have been in special education for decades now. Wow, that sounds crazy. But I have noted, like, current educational models really seem to be moving to be focused on, individualized instruction. We're starting to understand and recognize that tailored interventions are helpful, that co-regulation and self-regulation strategies are very helpful for kiddos in the classroom, and trauma-informed practices are starting to become more kind of mainstream and accepted. And so these current educational models do directly contradict the marginalization, exclusion, and discrimination that are being faced by SGM youth in our schools. And they cause very real damage to the health and well-being of our students. And if, we have to go there, we can always say that, yes, these exclusionary practices we're going to talk about also impact the academic outcomes for these students. So a lot of this information is pulled from the idea or the research that shows that youth of color are disproportionately affected by discrimination, and then that can lead to school push out. So increased dropout rates, not engaging in school, that kind of thing. So that's youth of color. And then they're starting to build this foundation of research showing that other marginalized youth are also pushed out of school in the same kind of way. And specifically, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, and other types of gender nonconforming groups are also experiencing this same push out. So I know, and you know, hopefully, that, or you will know by the end of this, that this phenomenon is not unique to sexual and gender minority youth. And that's not at all what we're saying. We're saying it also applies in this situation. And so here is just some research evidence that shows that we have some reasons here for actually participating in this work. They are kind of the doom and gloom statistics that you might see, about 3 times more likely to drop out of high school than the general population. SGM youth are more likely to be expelled, and detained in juvenile justice facilities. And so these folks are not opinions. They are facts, and they are research based. And so, feel free to use those as you need also. But the point is really that the school discipline experience of a lot of SGM students and youth is not well researched. It's a relative mystery compared to other populations, and that's just because of the way that the data are currently being collected at a federal and local level, and it just doesn't allow us to break some of those things down by this population. So I think that's a really important piece of this whole process. So we also need to know that it's important to note, right, that identifying as LGBTQ, and this does say LGBTQ instead of SGM because it is a quote, does not automatically put youth at greater risk. And so that is something we hear a lot, is the idea that, sexual and gender minority or LGBTQ youth are more likely to blah, 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 insert every possible risk factor and bad behavior you can there. And so just want to point out that it instead, right, it's being LGBTQ in a sexist, transphobic, heterosexist, and homophobic school or community where you're likely to experience bias-based aggression that negatively impacts their mental health. It is not the fact that they're LGBTQ, and that is something that we will continue to talk about because I feel like it is just so important. Deep breath. So I won't talk about this a lot because I think it sounded like most people have some experience with the idea, but just want to acknowledge that systemic heterosexism is out there. It's very real. It's ingrained in our schools and processes from kindergarten, probably earlier, and it continues to be reinforced in schools through policies and daily activities and how we respond to students in this population. And there are some examples on the slide. We will talk about these school-specific disparities and how unequal enforcement of different types of school policies is related to sexual and gender minority youth, and how they are approached and disciplined within the school system. And so you can see here that they're, more often penalized for public displays of affection. They are more likely to receive dress code violations, be punished based on rumors or lack of evidence, which I think is really interesting. And they're more likely to be suspended or expelled, and they are not supported by adults in their surroundings when bullying and harassment occur. And so, as you can see, the majority of these disparities are occurring in situations where there's a human mediator who is responsible for making a decision about whether or not the act that the student has participated in or allegedly participated in is worthy of punishment. And so we have that. That's the key in that little piece, I think, where we can really make a lot of difference. So here are some more. This is one of those slides you can kind of just take with you, but it has, just some facts and information, statistics you can use to kind of help build a case for the need surrounding this topic. And we sum it up by saying, in effect, these youth may be blamed, ignored, or even punished for behaviors that should elicit support rather than punishment from school staff. And we would argue that in almost any other situation, it would, elicit those feelings of support rather than punishment. So we're talking about exclusion specifically right now. And I just want to point out why it's important that we acknowledge and talk about exclusion. When we say exclusion or exclusionary discipline, we're talking about any type of punishment or disciplinary action that would remove the student from the learning environment. And so, that could be anything from turn around and face the wall so they can't see the board, to go sit in the hall, or go to the principal's office. And then, of course, we have suspension and expulsion. So all of those things are forms of exclusionary discipline. And it is important to talk about them because of the way they impact LGBTQ and sexual gender minority people throughout their lifespan. You can see there are all kinds of negative things on this slide. A couple of them are lack of access to healthcare services that lead to poorer health outcomes, and then increased rates of depression and suicide as well. So these are the sad things, the negative things. So there is also a discussion in this work that revolves around risk and protective factors. And many of you probably know or have a sense of what they are. It is foundational for the research and interventions I'm going to talk about, that we kind of understand what they are. So risk factors are anything that increase the likelihood that an individual will engage with a negative state, right? Depression, suicidality, dropout, anything like that. So any of those characteristics are considered risk factors. And then on the other side, we have protective factors, which are, conditions that kind of mitigate that risk. So they promote healthy development and positive familial relationships and things like that. And the idea is that if we can increase these protective factors, that we can kind of buffer some of the negative effects that the risk factors pose. So hopefully that discussion makes sense, or you're somewhat familiar with it. I know I am rushing through this. There's just so much, but So to date, when I look, there are no best practices listed in the What Works Clearinghouse that address the specific needs of SGM youth in schools. And that whole statement has to be taken as one, because there are some different types of interventions that do have been shown to be very helpful for SGM youth and their families, but a lot of them don't take place within the school system. And so, if we're talking about an educational systems approach, we need to kind of be able to pick and choose which of those we want to use. So there, um, there are some models and interventions that kind of fall within these four categories. But we have camps and retreats, we have individual or family counseling and therapy models, professional development and in-service training models. Aha, very relevant to what we're talking about. And then also resource and referral services. And so I do have a slide that I have put together on kind of each of these things. I'm not going to cover them right now. But again, I do want you to have the research and information about kind of the outcomes and concerns, the pros and cons, if you would like that for later. So we have camp models, counseling and therapy models, resource and referral services is another one, and then professional development and in-service training models that are often used at schools or businesses. This one I will look at a little bit because we are going to talk more about it, but it involves formal or informal training in the form of either workshops, classes, other kinds of service activities that are designed to increase the knowledge or skills of whoever the audience is, in the hopes that they'll be able to apply that new knowledge and skills in their work setting. And so this is a good fit for the education system. It is difficult to standardize processes or procedures, and there is widely variable, just outcomes, outputs, measures, and processes that these professional development models can take, as I'm sure many of you in the education system are aware. Okay, so one thing I do want to address is just the idea of resilience. When we're talking about those protective factors, we're trying to build resilience. And you read and hear, well, I do anyway, a lot about that in the literature. What is resiliency? And so quickly, the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, your toughness, right? Or the ability, these are, dictionary definitions, but the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape. So elasticity. Resiliency is great. I cannot overstate the importance of resiliency and building resilience within, all students, especially minoritized populations, and especially our sexual and gender minority youth. So it's a necessary part of most interventions and systems change efforts. But when we focus only on resilience and skill building within those minoritized populations, it does two things. And it's no surprise because it says it down here on the bottom of the slide. But so it ignores systemic issues, right? And it very nicely takes the responsibility for making a change, developing and building new skills, coping, and turns it right around and puts it back on the victim or the minoritized population. In essence, we're saying, hey, we are going to help you increase your ability to put up with the hard things and keep going. Does it need to happen? Sure. But it hopefully, you can kind of see the disconnect there of if we only focus on building those resiliency skills, we aren't addressing the issues that are really at the root of the problem. this quote, when I came across it, really hit me hard. And it says, "I dream of never being called resilient again in my life. I'm exhausted by strength. I want support. I want softness. I want ease. I want to be amongst kin, not patted on the back for how well I can take a hit or for how many." And I really appreciate this quote, and hopefully just take a second to think about that, um, and what it really means for students. Because in any other situation, if maybe not any, that's an overstatement, but if a student has a problem and they come to an adult in their life who they trust, they're hoping for some kind of resolution or problem solving or solution or ideas. Um, and it really is time that we just quit telling youth and other, marginalized populations that they just need to be more resilient. They need to develop more coping strategies, um, because it's just not fair. So we have some problems of practice just in general. There's a lack of research and information regarding SGM populations. Systemic homophobia and bias are obviously still running rampant in our society and school. And for some reason, which I, yeah, I do understand, but I wished I didn't. Policies regarding SGM student issues, they're confusing or contradictory. A lot of, teachers, school staff members, counselors are being told, "Hey, do everything you can to support students, but you can't do this." And so um, that is one thing that we, I think, as a society, need to figure out how to resolve. Okay, here we go. So, what do we do? Wanted to make sure we got to this part. So, since there aren't any kind of really established, um, especially according to the What Works Clearinghouse, um, interventions for these students, we really need to just use traditionally accepted models and then improve them and tailor them. And so, let's see. So, this is my based on the research I've read and my experiences and work, this is one idea of how we can do that. So we know that multi-tiered systems of support, the MTSS framework, is popular. There is research showing that it is effective, and that it can be implemented within the school system with a fair amount of fidelity. And so I think that is a really good place to start, especially when we look down here at this multi-level prevention systems piece. So what we are going to do with this model is just take that piece and expand it, and kind of use it as a framework to give us a language to talk about some of these interventions and where they will fit. So here's the MTSS pyramid. Hopefully most people are at least a little bit familiar with the idea of the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. The idea of universal supports, targeting all students, more targeted supports in tier 2 for people who need a little bit extra help, small group intervention, that type of thing. And then we have tier 3, which is a more intensive types of supports. So we have the multi-tiered systems of support framework, and I put a plus in there because we have to add a few things when we're talking about this population. So under tier 1 supports, some things that are evidence-based that we can implement within schools. The first one is a staff-wide professional development program. And I did break each of these out so we could look at them a little bit. But in these professional development programs, we are trying to help people develop what's called diversity self-efficacy. And that's basically just an individual's confidence level in addressing different concerns related to diversity using the knowledge and skills that they develop. And so this does fit in tier one because it is a universal type of approach. It would be for all staff. And then, hopefully could be expanded even to, student or peer groups. And so there are some ideas there of evidence-based components that we have seen in different types of professional development that could and should be utilized in this model. So professional development, another important one I think that is talked about less often is normalizing SGM identities within schools and the school structure. For people who aren't familiar with the term, normalization really just means making it a part of everyday life. And it really helps remove that stigma and taboo around discussions of sexual and gender minority identities and lifestyles. And so there are subtle ways that we can intentionally embed these within educational systems. One of them is allowing and advertising student clubs, activities, and organizations right alongside of other extracurricular offerings. And I know last time I said a similar thing, there were suddenly a bunch of comments about, well, we can't do that. We're limited by the school. People are telling us no. And so instead of, I don't know what to say to that, except for it's a really important thing. And instead of allowing, yourselves to stand there with kind of your hands tied, I think it's really important that we get involved in policy and advocacy work that will help us be able to implement those things better. We can also work on incorporating diverse lifestyles in curriculum content, and then also just promoting SGM people in our school-related media, our art, our websites, the stories we read, the story problems we assign, and then also creating and enforcing policies that respect individual identities and utilize the use of correct names and pronouns, and I mean by teachers and staff, as well as encouraging by peers. So that normalization is really important. And then also, we kind of talked about this in the earlier slides, but implementing a just and fair disciplinary system that that helps students stay engaged, in class and in the school process. And I do think this qualifies under tier one because the point is to make the system more just and fair for all students, not only for SGM students. It is harmful for all students, especially minoritized populations, to be removed from the school learning environment. And so one step is examining our current policies and data and looking at where things could change. Are there places where there, is human error could occur or discrimination could occur? And so really trying to address those issues. Promoting policies that are trauma informed, and then also use restorative practices for classroom reentry. There is a model out of University of Oregon in Dr. Rondonice's lab called ISLA. It's the Inclusive Skill Building Learning Approach, and it really focuses on restorative justice and gives some specific ideas and formulas for what does everyone do when a situation occurs in the classroom and a student has to be removed? How do we do that? how do we minimize things? How do we reintroduce them back into the class? And so yeah, just kind of a plug for that work because I think it's very applicable. And that's Dr. Rhonda Neese at the University of Oregon. Okay, so we're moving on to Tier 2 supports and what we can do there. Have a couple of ideas about that also. You know, in the MTSS framework and the tiered support systems of support, Tier 2 is for, you know, those students or families who need a little bit more help and targeted intervention. So we can increase family engagement. I also put the names of these two organizations here on the slide. I have had the pleasure of working with the Family Acceptance Project for a couple of years now and have a lot of respect for what they can do for families and our LGBTQ plus kiddos. So if you know a student or family who is really struggling with these issues, please look up the information on the Family Acceptance Project. You should just be able to Google it and provide those resources back to families because they offer workshops. They work with parents, they'll train educators, but it really is about meeting the family where they're at and finding that common ground, which is almost always has to do with the harmful practices that they or behaviors that they have are done out of fear, of their kiddos having struggles, and then also just not knowing what to do. So it's a lack of knowledge and skills and fear. And so this project really targets that. I can't say enough good things about that. So also, we can provide access to workshops or other resources where families can get information on building relationships with their youth. Another way that fits in the Tier 2 is to offer SGM affirming clubs or groups within the schools. So developing those and then actively promoting them alongside, other extracurricular activities is really important. Also, a lot of school counselors or sociologists, other people are in the schools are qualified to run kind of small groups or peer groups for these students where they can get some safe space and sharing strategies. So that's another thing that we can use for that. I'm going to move quickly into this Tier 3 so we can wrap up and hopefully have a time for a question or two. But even if we don't, please email me any questions or information that you have or need. So, okay, so for Tier 3 supports, it makes sense that schools themselves aren't necessarily equipped with all of the resources needed to address a lot of Tier 3 interventions. And so some of that is going to be referrals, right? Providing referrals to counseling services, to CPS or YFS, Child Protective Services or Youth and Family Services is what those acronyms are. So on the part of the school or the counselors or other adults involved, it's our responsibility to make sure we are familiar with what is offered in the community, how people can get help. We have called those helplines to make sure that they work and things like that so that our referrals are strong and then follow up. So that's one way that we can help kind of with those more intense situations. Also, implementing student check-in programs. Use what you know and what the literature has shown to be effective for students who are struggling. Some of the like check-in, check-out models or weekly meetings, other things that are effective are also going to be effective in this situation. And you're just checking in to say, hey, how are you doing now? What do you need? So that's a preventive strategy, but it's also tier 3. And then also we could implement mentoring systems for students. And then that could be peers or trusted adults within the school system. Like I mentioned too, many people within schools, social workers and some school counselors are qualified to actually provide counseling or therapeutic services on site. And so I would encourage that, people who work within the school system, administrators, even, counselors, parents, whoever, really advocate for the roles of the school counselors and psychologists and social workers to be kind of redirected away from doing more at some of the more administrative tasks and actually putting them towards some of these more therapeutic things that they could be doing, offering workshops and being familiar with different strategies. And then last, definitely not least, right, we have different types of individualized interventions. I can't tell you what all of these are because they're targeted and they're individualized, but some suggestions, like I had mentioned, were check-in, check-out programs, track students, give them kind of regular contact and support, providing mentoring services. Even just connecting them, students with peer groups that are supportive, or encouraging them to attend, different clubs or safe spaces is one way you can really make a difference there. So the last thing with this model, and part of it, it is very important that we are including in this plus, right? We're missing cohesive policy and sustainability, like efforts of sustainability to move these things forward. We have seen as time has progressed and policy has moved forward and then backwards, just the importance of advocacy, of policy, and of people's need to be aware, of the surroundings that are in the community, the choices that they have to, vote, what those, so providing even some kinds of, providing some kinds of nonpartisan information about what policies there are out there that affect SGN populations. And then also creating some kind of professional development or advisory board that includes a lot of different stakeholders to kind of keep it on track, to make sure your policies are consistent with philosophies and that type of thing. So I would advocate for that piece. So everybody take a deep breath. Kind of intense for a little while there. Here are some questions that are just some food for thought. But I do want to look at the actual questions that people may have had and see, give you a chance to ask those so I can respond to them. This presentation, my email address is rwheatley, so that's WHEATLEY at uoregon.edu. And I would highly encourage and very much welcome any questions or comments, additional resources, things like that. I do have a couple of things I can help connect folks with, including things like LGBTQ oriented, like QPR and suicide prevention classes and efforts. So please email me. And then if you request it and I send this to you, there are some resources, and then also the references are here. So I want to make sure you knew that, but I'm going to put it back on this question screen. And yeah, ask if we have any questions in the Q&A chat.
Yeah, we do, Ricky. So the first question I've got for you is how can we support school staff to make other disciplinary choices for students that aren't exclusionary?
That is a really great question. And one of the things that I would say really is look at that ISLA model. ISLA, Inclusive Skill Building Learning Approach, is out of the University of Oregon. Their piece on restorative practices and rebuilding relationships is really helpful, I think, as far as kind of providing some guidance about what to do. Also, I mean, professional development and providing resources is about, it is about all. Unfortunately, there's a lot of information out there that people can access if they go looking for it on their own. And, I'm sure that all the educators in the room have, just more time and resources than they know what to do with. And so that would be a great way for them to use all of their extra. That was obviously being sarcastic. I know you're you're strapped. But I think making it part of the school environment is the answer to that question, so that it's not an additional thing that we're having to do, but that this kind of support is just built and embedded into kind of every level, um, of the system. I don't know if that's an adequate answer, but were there any more questions?
I am not seeing any more questions in the Q&A box, and I'm not seeing any more in the chat. But we have the time, so I would encourage folks, if you've got a question, please put it in the Q&A box. I can see those come in real time. And I think I've got one for you now. I just saw one come in.
Great.
So is there intentional consideration for this expectation angle to be placed in the college level standards for all who are intending on becoming an educator, if that makes sense?
So if I'm understanding the question right, you're asking if I know if there is intentional kind of like placement or push within the like teacher education systems and leadership systems.
Within college specifically.
Yeah. So I'm constantly surprised and somewhat disappointed to find that not necessarily. It should be. And it definitely is more important in some institutions and departments than it is in others. I know that one of the big places that they've been able to target is school counseling systems, just because of how well the oh my gosh, I can't remember what they're called now, but the policy statements and goal statements of kind of the school counseling model really match up well with providing some of these services and advocating for students. And so that's one place I have seen it kind of intentionally. There's curriculum and things like that. But, I mean, even at our university, like it is up to, the teacher of the course or the people within the department to pull some of those resources in. And so unfortunately, I think there's a desire and there's a start, but there is no big standardized push. And so that is one way we can all become involved kind of in being the solution, and hitting this at kind of the root of the problem is to engage in those conversations and support policies that bring these things to the forefront. And as a parent, that might be talking to your school administrator or, I mean, whoever your contact is, and letting them know how important these issues are to you. and that they matter to you as a parent, and they matter to your students. Because man, uh, hate to bring it all around to the sad reality, but the squeaky wheel really does get the grease in these situations. Just because of the nature of the lack of time and resources, and how overworked and mostly underpaid a lot of these staff members are. They just can't take on extra things unless they know that they really matter. So their intentions may be good, but I would say without you, people out there in the audience to kind of push that forward, it's never gonna quite get there. So how's that? Turn it around and put it back.
Great. Ricky, I believe we probably have time for about one more question. So I see, what is the best way to track your future efforts in building some of the supports discussed here today?
So, I don't know if I've thought about that in exactly that way, because typically one of the problems is it's not developed, right? But typically with a package or program, we would also be given, a way to assess, or a checklist, or something like that, to say, have we done this and this and this? We don't have that in this situation, but I would say, again, go back to your the pyramid, right? The MTSS framework, or the systems of support framework. And one way you could start is by looking at the programs that you have within your school, or that you have available to you, and kind of pairing those up with a tier. And so you can start to see, you might have to be the one making, the spreadsheet or the worksheet, but it's really helpful to do an inventory of what services you have within each of those tiers. Because if you, then you can see, hey, we're missing, universal supports, or something like that. And so from there, I would just say set goals, and revisit it, and hopefully see yourself filling in more of those strategies as you go. But if there was one main takeaway, that I had for school people, anyone involved in the education system, like including parents, is just that this work really starts not by having grandiose efforts, where you come in and redo the whole system, or you bring a bunch of new things in. It really starts with those tier 1 strategies that just involve educating our staff members, our parents, and other students, and then normalizing the conversations about having different types of identities. Those little things where you pull in, throw in, if you're a math instructor, throw in a couple of problems, somewhere in there, that it's his dad's anniversary and they have to do, this or that, and story problems, and assign readings, in English and social studies, whatever it is, that involve diverse families. Because we can bring in a lot of different types of supports. We can do all that. But if we don't have that foundation there of the normalization to have the conversations, then none of it's going to take anyway. So, and I think we're about at time, correct?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ricky. Really appreciate your time today. So we're going to close this session up. You have a 30-minute break. Our next session starts soon. And please, please, please fill out that survey. You'll find it in the reception area. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.